All right, guys. Down. We're back. Raphael and Schwann here, talking to you about MMA. Let's do this. Schwann, how you doing, sir?
Not too bad at all, except for all these technical hiccups, keeping us from getting the show running on time. But I appreciate you sticking with me, sir.
Hey, man. You're good. You're good. All right. So, man, this is the first show. Let's act like that never happened. Talk to me about Chael Sonnen and Shane Carwin, man. You want to see these guys come back and fight, or are you over and done with them both?
I wouldn't mind it. The thing about Chael Sonnen, I don't know why he'd want to come back to fight. To be quite honest, I can't imagine he'd be doing anything except taking a pay cut to fight. I mean, the UFC isn't known for making people millionaires, and I know he's got a name and a brand, but he has so many other directions he can go as it stands now, working for ESPN, his own podcast, different commercials, and people who use him for sponsorship. I don't know what the urge would be for him to come back in the first place. And as far as how he competes, middleweight is surprisingly average except for the elite guys. So there's a 50-50 chance he could put a streak together against lower level guys. He's not contending for a title at this stage, though. His style just doesn't age very well, and he wasn't the most dynamic athlete in the first place. So I can't imagine now, after a couple years off, not having any performance enhancers, that he'd be the athlete he was before. At this stage, I don't know if he's anything more than a stepping stone or a big name for them to bring in to maybe up a buy rate. Because style-wise, he's not particularly exciting. I mean, he can still talk, he can still sell, but I think the jig is kind of up on him. So, I mean, if he wants to do it, like you said, I wouldn't not watch it, but I wouldn't have very high hopes for anything he'd be doing. It'd be just kind of like, oh, well, let's just see what he's got. As far as Carwin, given his power and his strength, he could probably be a legit top 10 heavyweight. I mean, he still can knock guys out. He's got a good enough wrestling base, and if his chin is still there, he's even money to be a top 10, top 7 heavyweight. I mean, the division is just so thin. Everybody's older, and he should have the time off should have given some time to recover. He doesn't have all the extra wear and tear from training and fighting all the time. It might actually play in his favor. He'd still be one of the better wrestlers in division. He'd still be one of the biggest punchers in division. I don't know if he beats the top 3 guys, Velasquez, Verdum, or Miocic, but the other guys, anybody else, I'd have to say he's probably even money. Even money as far as performance, athleticism, and overall skill set. He'd probably be even money with anybody else in division. So he'd actually have a chance to maybe contend if matched right and could get a streak together. He could probably contend. I mean, he's a wrestler with knockout power. That's usually a recipe for success at the heavyweight division.
Okay, so I looked at the top 15 that are currently out there right now. Let's see. I looked at it like this. I think he can beat Ruslan Magomedov, fight for him, but I think he can win that. Stefan Struve. Didn't he already knock out Frank Mir? Yeah, he did. So he has a win over Frank Mir. Nelson. I think Derek Lewis gets him out of there, though.
You forgot?
Derek Lewis wins.
Agree.
Josh Barnett will be a tough one. Mark Hunt, I think Hunt wins that. Number 8. I think Carwin can beat Lesnar. And then you have Brown, Arlovsky. I think he can win both of those fights.
Agree.
Well, Dos Anjos, Overeem, Velasquez, Verdum, Miocic. I think he loses all of those. But that right there alone puts him in what? 5, 6, somewhere within that range. So, yeah, he could come back and make a run. All it takes is for them to book a heavyweight fight, somebody get hurt, and then they're looking for a replacement. And next thing you know, boom, Shane Carwin is fighting for the UFC heavyweight title.
Yeah, if you think about it, his resume, even though he hasn't fought in years, his resume is probably one of the top 4 as far as opponents beaten and opponents he's faced in the octagon. His resume is still top 4 in division. I mean, only Velasquez, Dos Santos, and Miocic can really say they have a better list of opposition they faced and or beaten. Maybe Roy Nelson as well. So, I mean, it wouldn't I would actually have more faith in Shane Carwin going back in than I would in Chael Sonnen, because the division is really thin. The division is really old, so he's right in the same age range. He's not going to be fighting a lot of guys 10 to 15 years younger than him with all the new and exciting techniques and styles. The heavyweight division pretty much stays in the same kind of set of skills, set of techniques, and pace that it was when he left. So, I mean, he fit right in and wouldn't miss a step. You just named 4 or 5 fights he could win. You get him on a 5-fight win streak and have him challenge for a title within the year and a half if he pushed hard enough.
Not at all. Not one bit. You know, it's funny hearing Chael Sonnen's back, you know, saying if he can be allowed to take a specific type of curve per se when it comes to drug testing. I think that's hilarious, and that speaks to whatever he's doing during his off time. But, you know, it is what it is. I don't think he's going to come back. I won't be interested in seeing him come back, but, you know, it is what it is at this point in time. Then we also had another interesting story from this week. I was talking about UFC 202 and how it's outshining, even though it's just about a month away. And I think this is going to be the biggest card financially this year. I think that just looking at the card itself and what they have going on, comparing it to UFC 201 and UFC 200, I think that UFC 202 is going to be the biggest event of the year.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. The biggest thing with the McGregor and Diaz fight, if I recall correctly, one of the biggest things when they first fought that kind of let me down was that we didn't have the right time to promote the fight, you know, because the 2 press conferences they had were like magic. They were amazing. I watched those press conferences over and over. They were just so entertaining, and none of it was forced. It was just 2 guys with clashing personalities who know how to talk and didn't pull any punches. And it was just incredibly enjoyable to watch. And I'm just so excited to see as they go through the media tours, hear Conor go at Diaz go back at him. It's just going to draw all the interest in. All these other cards they've had have had good fights, have had exciting fights, but they haven't had any of the star power. And that's what really separates when you want to become a crossover star or a crossover event. You have to have star power. It's like the Super Bowl is popular regardless. In the Super Bowl, you have Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl. That says something. That draws in a lot of fans. You have LeBron James and the Cavaliers playing Golden State again in a finals rematch. That draws all sorts of ratings. When you have the San Antonio Spurs and the New Jersey Nets, it still drew ratings, but not the kind of ratings that come with name, would come with star power, would come with people who have a little bit more charisma other than just, I came here to fight, I'm going to do my best, I want to fight the best, I want the title. Both of those guys have fan bases outside of the UFC, and both of those guys know how to talk and how to get reactions from people. And that's the difference between that card and everything else. Robbie Lawler, Tyrone Woodley, they're not standout personalities. Miesha Tate, for her popularity, isn't really a standout personality. Neither is Julia Pena. Neither is, to be honest, John Jones or Daniel Cormier. So this fight is the fight that's going to draw all the eyes, and it's going to have people from casuals to hardcore fans really invested in it to see what happens.
So UFC 201, is this on Robbie Lawler's star power? You know, I was just actually reading something that he feels like the MMA community doesn't respect him, doesn't give him the attention that he deserves, and I can see that. I can get that because I feel like he isn't really talked about the same way that Michael Bisping are talked about, or, you know, he's not really even considered in the pound for pound conversation. And what's interesting is I think I'm thinking about the MMA ratings we put together every so often. And I think he's sitting number 3 right now in the position behind Mighty Mouse and John Jones. And curious, I don't know. I don't think the show is going to do good numbers. So much of a negative thing about him is going to play into MMA burnout from this month. I think that's definitely going to play a part in it. But I don't think this card is going to do good numbers, and I think that negative reflection when it really shouldn't, especially when you take into account that Tyron Woodley isn't much of a personality.
I don't think Robbie gets a lack of respect from the hardcore or the MMA community. He gets all the respect for him, but that's the problem. That's really the only people he gets respect from, and part of it is just, I guess it's how people are, but I think a lot of it is Robbie Lawler. He doesn't have it. Like, he's one of those guys who wants to fight. He doesn't want to do extra press. He doesn't want to give a bunch of interviews. He doesn't want to show up at a bunch of events. He doesn't want to play to the crowd. I mean, he does all his talking in the cage. He does in the cage. He doesn't do all the extra stuff, and that's the kind of stuff that takes you from being a regular star to a superstar. And a lot of MMA fighters have this same problem. They only want to do what they want to do, which is fine. You'll get your check, you'll get your bonus, you'll move up the ranks or move down the ranks, you'll get a title shot, you'll win, you'll defend your title. That's fine. That's what that'll get you. If you want to get that other money, that Conor McGregor money, that Uriah Faber money, and you want to get the opportunities that come with those kind of guys, then you have to go out of your way and extend yourself and risk your camp and risk your rest and risk the balance you have in your life to draw eyes to yourself, to draw fans to yourself, and to get yourself out there. Guys like Robbie Lawler don't want to do that. He thinks that me fighting should be enough. And for any superstar in any sport, when it has just been doing your sport, been enough for you to be a superstar. It's not enough. Wasn't enough for Oscar De La Hoya. Wasn't enough for Floyd Mayweather. Wasn't enough for Peyton Manning. Wasn't enough for Tom Brady. They all did stuff outside of their main activity, which was their sport, to take them to the next level. Same thing with LeBron James. He's doing movies and tons of commercials. If all he did was play basketball, he wouldn't be half the star he is. He got to a certain point because of basketball. He took it to the next level with branding. Robbie Lawler's gotten to a certain point with MMA. What else has he done to draw fans in and establish his brand and to expand his popularity? I mean, have you seen him do interviews? Have you seen him try to get on talk shows? Have you seen him at expos and events drawing the fans and doing everything he can to let them know him? Or does he just do a UFC countdown and think that's enough? Because it's not. And none of the guys who make top money and none of the guys who are big names, that they all do more than that. They all work harder than him in that phase, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. Even Mighty Mouse, Mighty Mouse personality, but with this whole he has grown a following there that so yeah, you're right. Robbie hasn't really kind of set himself apart in a different way. Like, I don't even know social media. Like, you have Joanna Champion, who basically is a social media darling at this point. Holly Holm is the same. It'll be interesting to see what the ratings number or what the pay-per-view buy rate is for this show come next week. But let's keep talking about UFC 201. As I was talking earlier, I saw a prediction that has Woodley winning by first-round knockout. And, man, because it was talking about – the author was talking about the idea that, away from what made him so dangerous in throwing combinations, which is understandable. He definitely has kind of leaned towards trying to put guys out with one or two punches. But Woodley isn't much of a combination guy either. He's gotten better on his striking, and he hasn't leaned on his wrestling so much. But when he fought Rory McDonald and lost that fight, it looked like he was kind of winding up looking for that one-hit kill. And I think if he gets lulled into that type of fight on Saturday, he's going to lose a 5-round decision. Would I be surprised if he knocked out Lawler? But it's just interesting to see people make that actual selection.
Yeah, I like Woodley. He seems like a very smart guy. I think he probably trains very intelligently. I've known a couple people who train with him. They say he's a really good guy, really professional in his training, really open-minded. The whole problem with Woodley is he's very dynamic in short bursts. He has bursts of offense, and then he has moments where he does nothing, which would be fine offensively. You can lower your output. His problem is not only does his offense fall off, but his defense. He starts standing in one place. He starts backing up in straight lines. He starts letting his hands drop. He starts allowing himself to get hit and get outworked. If his defense is on point, then you can kind of dip. You can hit angles. You can circle away, and you can set traps for those big counter hooks to the body, duck under a jab, throw a straight right to the body. There's variations you can do, but when Woodley gets tired, everything just goes out the window. He literally goes from going 100 miles an hour to zero. His productivity on both ends falls off a cliff, and that's why he has such a problem in fights. He can throw in combination, but he's so dynamic and he throws so hard when he does, he can't maintain it for more than a round and a half. And I believe the reason he's gotten away from his wrestling isn't because his stand-up has gotten so much better. It's less exhausting to be in stand-up exchanges than it is to attempt takedowns. Even a successful takedown takes a huge amount of energy. And if that guy gets right back up, you just wasted a bunch of energy taking him down to do nothing. And if he defends the takedown and you start chasing it, you're like burning huge gallons and gallons of your energy all the way. So I think he's worked on his striking so that he doesn't have to lean on his wrestling, because as good as dynamic as he is, his wrestling isn't really world class. It's not top shelf. I've seen guys defend his takedown. Paul Daly's defended takedowns. Paul Daly's made him work. Rory McDonald's been able to defend takedowns. He's not some instant takedown ground control machine. That's not who Tyron Woodley is. And I believe the reason he's focused on the stand-up is because it allows him to not drain his tank with repeated shots and trying to pull someone down, getting stuffed, getting countered, getting sprawled out. That's my belief. He can knock out Lawler. He's that dynamic. But the question is, if the fight goes past a round and a half, what happens to Tyron Woodley? He hasn't fought in like a year and a half. He's been training, but there's a difference between training and fighting. And like you always say, I can't really go with a guy who's been that inactive for that long, coming in against a guy who's been fighting regularly and who's at the top of his game.
I definitely agree with you on that, man. I don't this fight goes, the more this plays into Lawler's wheelhouse. I'm surprised. I was very surprised with seeing that selection there. I'm going to pick Lawler to win by a decision. But man, the way the MMA guys have been going to win this fight by knockout, the welterweight division into a mess. So we'll see what happens.
I just want to say one more thing. My concern with Lawler, he actually does I know people say he's not throwing as many combinations, but Lawler's like a lot older than he used to be. So I don't think he has the energy for 5. I mean, to be honest, throughout his whole career, Lawler's had huge highs and huge lows in the middle of a fight where he literally does nothing. The difference between him and Woodley is Lawler pays attention to defense. He might only throw 1 or 2 shots, but he's picking off your shots with his forearms, with his elbows, with his hands, parrying and blocking, and then he's looking for that 1 or 2 big those counter shots. And since his defense is working, he's not getting beat up. He's not getting pushed against the fence. He's not getting roughed up. You might be throwing a lot of volume like Honda did, but you're not landing really clean. And then every so often, he'll throw a big counter, maybe a 1-2, maybe a 3 if he's really feeling it. And if he hurts you, he's going to go in for the finish. But those 3 he hits so hard, he can literally turn around in his favor by landing a big shot that drops you or hurts you badly. Because you landed 15 shots that did nothing. He landed 3, and now you're stumbling across the cage. Now the round's 50-50, either yours or his. So I don't like when people just say he's gotten away from it. I don't think it's a technical thing. I think it's a matter of age and conserving his energy and picking his spots. But even though his offense drops off, his defense never goes away in the way the Woodley's does and so many other MMA fighters does. If you watch the fights closely, he's not getting hit clean. You might be throwing 20 shots, but he's not getting hit clean. But when he throws and he lands, he's landing very clean on his opponents. And the only reason I see that Woodley would beat him is because he's got a lot of tread on his tires. He's been training and fighting for years. I mean, he was in the original UFC. Like, he was he's a pioneer of the sport. And he's been on a lot of wars, a lot of 5-round fights. And you start wondering, when is he going to get old? That's my concern. It's nothing of skill-wise, nothing with strategy. I think Lawler's one of the smarter guys and best prepared guys in MMA. The thing about it is, when is he going to get old? When is that chin not going to be able to take a shot like it used to? Because a lot of what he does, even with his defense, is dependent on him being able to take punishment and then come right back out and ramp it back up and fire right back at you. If he can't take punishment the way he used to, Woodley's power is a huge problem. Like I said before, Lawler isn't lazy on defense, though. Self out, and he goes a round and a half. We've seen him exposed and embarrassed by Rory McDonald and by Tariq Safadine in Strikeforce. We've seen him exposed. We've seen him dead tired, getting knocked around by guys who don't have the wrestling to stay on their feet, or guys who should be able to out-athlete him and out-muscle him. So that's my question. What happens after 2 rounds? But early on, he can catch Lawler, and he can knock him out, because I don't think Lawler's what he was durability-wise. It's just the question is, does he have enough left to take the kind of bombs that Woodley's going to be throwing at him? Yeah,
man, it's definitely going to be crazy. If that belt switches hands, I think it's going to be a whole shit show, man. Co-main event, you got Rose Namajunas and Karolina Kowalskiewicz. I'm not saying her last name right, but this is the favorite this weekend. She's been on quite a tear. Wins over Tisha Torres, Paige Van Zandt, and Angela Hill. I think this is a title eliminator for both women because Joanna kind of needs a with that win over Claudia Gadelha. In this fight, I definitely think she's turned a corner. She'll have some length on her opponent, and I definitely think like her wrestling and grappling is just better recently. That time off that she took from the sport was definitely good for her. Her to win on Saturday. What about you?
I'd have to agree. I think Carolina's actually a lot tougher than many people are giving her credit for. The biggest issue I notice is there's going to be a gap in athleticism, and Carolina seems to have an issue with people who have a certain level of athleticism. When she's fought other people who weren't as athletic, her work rate's been a little bit better. She's been able to manhandle them, muscle them, been able to actively counterpunch and take the lead on them. But when she's had somebody who's had a bit of a speed advantage or explosiveness advantage, you haven't seen the same aggression always. You haven't seen the same cage IQ and awareness. She seems to get put on the defensive a little bit. And I think Rose has athleticism. She has quickness. She has length. And she's a naturally more explosive athlete. And the issue with Rose isn't a matter of whether she has the skills and ability. The issue is always, are you going to see always composed, focused Rose on the 3 or 4 fight win streak, or are you going to see the Rose who's flying R-bar, a spinning heel kick, a devastating front kick, the one who starts throwing those random techniques with no cohesion together? Fights her potential and shows control and poise and discipline and deliberate purpose in how she attacks her. She should be able to win a decision and win it clearly. But if she goes up there trying to make a highlight reel, she's going to make a mistake, get taken down, get pounded out, or get countered big, and then get taken down and get pounded out. That's really the only thing stopping her is her ability to stay with a disciplined game plan, which is jab, stay light on your feet, use your range, use your movement, and create opportunities to force transitions where you can work your submission game.
Namajunas gets the win on Saturday. Do you think she's next in line for a title shot?
I would think so. She's very popular. She's very exciting. And as far as I'm concerned, I think she's a tougher matchup than Claudia for the fact that she's not the wrestler Joanna is. In my opinion, a more dynamic submission grappler. Her ability to create scrambles and transition into submission together is something Joanna hasn't had to face. Usually if she can get back to her feet or she can put somebody on their back, they're trying to get back to their feet. They're trying to reverse her to get on top. Rose can work from the bottom, and she can use submissions to get back to her feet, or she can finish from the bottom. And much better striker technically, Rose has a lot of length, and she's very dynamic, and she's very creative on the feet. I think she can pose enough problems where she can get to the area she needs to get to beat Joanna. I really believe that. Joanna's power is a bit of an issue, and her work rate, but I think when Rose is using her jab and using her footwork and movement, I think she presents a lot of problems for Joanna, and I've said before that I think she can beat her.
Interesting. Do you think, because I think the issue would be with holding Joanna down. I think that would definitely be like the question for me. If Rose can hold her down long enough early in the fight to get the stoppage, because the longer the fight goes on, we've seen Joanna does not take her foot off the gas. So I would be concerned about if Joanna scores these early takedowns, and if she begins to exhaust herself getting these early takedowns, can she get the finish then, as opposed to allowing the fight to go longer, making it more difficult to get these takedowns and playing into Joanna's volume striking?
Well, I can see that point, but the thing about it is, Namajunas is actually a very, very good grappler. I mean, if you saw the fight with Van Zandt, she chained submissions together incredibly well. She can transition from front to back to top and bottom. She has an amazing skill to transition to different positions, and that's going to be the difference. A lot of girls work for that control. That's what they're hoping, to take Joanna down and get that control, or if they get put on their back, they're trying to reverse so they can hold her down and work her over. But Namajunas can actually work ground and pound, and Namajunas can actually work submissions. If she gets on top and can control, she can work a submission. If she's held down from the bottom, she can work submission. She can catch Joanna in a submission in the middle of a scramble. That's how good and that's how aware she is. That's how good her cage IQ is and her grappling is. It's not world class in the sense that she knows all the positions and she's such a finisher in every position with every submission, but her ability to kind of control the pace and create openings and to force scrambles against bigger, stronger, comparably athletic opponents is what makes her world class in MMA. And she wouldn't have to hold Joanna down. Joanna leaves her neck out, she's going to take it. She takes Joanna's back, she's going to finish. She gets Joanna's arm, she will break it. So Joanna won't have as much room for error as she has with Claudia. Claudia would take her down and try to pound her out and try to control her. Namajunas is going to go for the submission, and she can get it from any position. She can get chokes, arm bars, leg locks. She can do whatever she wants. And she's creative enough and fluid enough on the ground that the minute Joanna gives her any sort of opening or gives her anything to bait her, that bait could very well be the end of the night for her.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you're talking about there. Let's look at some other picks from UFC 201. Let me see, who else do we have to talk about? We have Matt Brown and Jake Ellenberger. I think this is a loser leaves town fight. Both of these guys are on the cusp of getting cut from the promotion. This is Brown's second time being in this position. You remember that 4-fight losing streak he was on back in the day? This fight, I'm picking Brown to win. I think he overwhelms Ellenberger. He hasn't looked like himself in years. Probably since that Jake Shields fight where he won, he just hasn't looked the same fight. Do you see Brown just basically overwhelming Jake here? And do you think the man who loses gets cut from the promotion?
On the second thing, I would say if Ellenberger loses, he'll probably get cut. And to be honest, he should have been cut. He hasn't been a world-class 170-pound fighter in 2 or 3 years. He's been basically living on the reputation of what he did 3 or 4 years ago. He hit a wall, and he's been declining ever since. He's pretty much a fairly one-dimensional wrestle boxer. His defense isn't very good. His offense is pretty basic. His wrestling isn't top shelf. The biggest advantage he had was his power and his aggression. And now that he can't take a shot at all it does is end up walking him into power shots. He's fine until you hit him. He's fine until you put hands on him. He's kind of in a similar situation that Gray Maynard was. Only difference is Gray Maynard fought a guy who without a lot of experience and who wasn't at a level comparable to what he was at. And Matt Brown is, in the past 3 or 4 years, he's just been a better fighter than Ellenberger. I guess Ellenberger could try to wrestle him and hold him down, but I haven't seen that Jake Ellenberger in years. I just haven't seen that guy. I don't think he has a cage IQ. I don't think he has the stamina. I don't think he has the durability to hold Brown down anymore, especially with the pace Brown sets and the level of aggression Brown comes out with. He's going to hit him. And Jake Ellenberger is most likely going to fold up after he takes a couple shots or gets stuck in that clinch and starts eating knees and elbows. If Brown loses the fight, I don't think he'd be cut. Well, I just don't see Brown losing the fight. I just don't see it. Brown's still an exciting fighter. He hasn't lost like 3 or 4 fights in a row, all by KO. Last fight, he's been fairly competitive, and when he's lost to somebody, he's lost to top-end guys who he should be losing to. Ellenberger has been just hit or miss so much that he really just shouldn't be at this level anymore. I don't even know that he's a Bellator welterweight anymore at this stage. So I'd have to go with Matt Brown.
Wow. Yes.
And if Brown lost, maybe he should be cut because you shouldn't be losing to Jake Ellenberger. The only guy who's lost to Ellenberger in the past couple of years is Josh Koscheck. And Josh Koscheck hasn't been a world-class welterweight in the past 5 or 6 years either. So that's telling you where Jake Ellenberger is at. Matt Brown's close. I mean, guys have kind of figured him out. He's never been an elite athlete, and he's never been an elite technician in past. He's got some tricks. He's very good in certain areas, but he's never been elite, and I don't think he ever will be. The streak he had was based off beating up a lot of guys who weren't that good in the first place, and a couple wins over name guys who also weren't that good either. And since he's kind of got past that streak and had his streak broken, he hasn't been as dominant or spectacular as he's been in the prior years before. So he's pretty much hit his ceiling, in my opinion, too. He'll still stick around. He's still the name. He's still exciting. But he wasn't elite to me before, and he's not going to be elite in the next 2 or 3 years either.
I think this fight is just about, fan service, trying to put together 2 guys that are going to get in there and throw haze at each other. So I'm not too pressed about that fight either. One fight I am excited to see is Francisco Rivera and Eric Perez. I think this is going to be one of the fights that can steal the weekend. Francisco is someone who I think is on the cusp of a breakthrough in bantamweight. And Eric Perez is somebody who is going to be hanging around for quite a little while too. I'm not ready to pick a winner. I'm leaning more towards Rivera in this fight here. But I'm looking forward to seeing this. And this is my fight to still 3 cards going on. And I think when we're all said and done, this is going to be a fight that we look back at as the best over the weekend.
Yeah, I'm actually an Eric Perez fan. He has a certain kind of energy and a vibrance and a kind of a natural charm in the way he fights and the way he comes across. Like, he really loves fighting. He really loves representing his people. He really loves kind of going out there and being in tough fights and making a statement and putting on a show for the fans. So I'm really a fan of him as a person, what I know of, and as a fighter. The only problem is he's been so inconsistent when he's gotten past a certain level. He's had so many holes in his game exposed, and the UFC really wants him to be a big star, but every time they put him up against the guys he needs to beat, top 10, top 5 guys, he's always lost. He has always lost, and he's lost pretty dominantly. When he lost to Carwin, it wasn't really close, to be quite honest. It was okay for a few minutes. When he lost to Mizugaki, it was an exciting back and forth fight, but he essentially had the fight won, and then he just lost control of it. He hasn't shown the most awareness and the most discipline or the most cardio in the way he fights. And I'm hoping that during this time he's had off, he's really kind of shored up his game, shored up his defense, tightened up his offense, because he's got the skills, he's got the physical tools, but he doesn't seem to have all the mental aspects covered. And I'm not sure if it's a matter of him or if it's a matter of his camp, because his camp is, at least as far as it goes with the striking, is kind of known for dynamic techniques and dynamic offense. They're not really known for consistent offense and precise offense and offense that sets you from one position to another. It's all kind of individual techniques. And that's been something that's gotten him in trouble when he's faced the better opponents on his resume. Against all the rest of them, looks great, looks fabulous. Against guys who are fringe top 10, he starts looking remarkably human. And once again, he's facing a guy who's on the way up, and that's kind of a problem for him. I have a hard time picking him because I haven't seen him perform against the caliber guy he's facing now. I haven't seen him be dominant. I haven't even seen him win against that kind of guy as far as athleticism and skill. So it's hard for me to pick for him to win this fight because he's never beaten that kind of opponent before.
Yeah, I can definitely see that going on. I think Cisco is going to get the job done, and I think this is a big win for him. Ever since that situation with Uriah Faber from a couple years ago, I think he's going to be able to get a statement victory this weekend. I would love to talk about Ian McCall and Justin Scoggins, but did you see the news that Scoggins is out of the fight?
No, I didn't. What happened with Scoggins?
It's weight issues is what I'm hearing. They're trying to find an opponent for McCall, or they're going to move this fight to another card. But yeah, news broke around today that 9:30 Eastern Standard Time that that Justin Scoggins is out of the fight. So I think that a lot of people are looking forward to that fight too. One of the best flyweights in the sport. Even he was considered the best before they brought flyweights to the UFC, and he's still considered, because he's only lost to Lineker, Johnson, and Benavidez. So he still can be considered in the top 5 in that group. But now, wait and see what happens when he comes if he comes back.
Yeah, Scoggins was really picking up steam. This is kind of a bad time for this to happen to him. People were really starting to pay attention to his style and his story, and he was connected. He had a prior connection with Stephen Thompson, so he's getting a lot of. Stephen Thompson started to rise up. A lot of people will mention his name as a guy who used to work with them and had a similar style, karate-based style. So this comes at a really bad time when his name was really starting to pick up some steam, and his chances of being considered a legitimate contender were actually starting to form. So I feel kind of bad for him. I don't think the McCall fight was a great fight for him because McCall hasn't, even though he's a legitimate guy in the division, he hasn't been particularly dominant or great in any of his wins, and he hasn't really beaten the best guys in the division. So I kind of thought it was a kind of risky fight for Scoggins. But I guess now he doesn't have to worry about it, and hopefully he can make the weight. He can still get back into the cage while his momentum and his name is kind of hot right now. It still has the heat it had before.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that UFC 201 is losing that fight. My boy Nikki Thrills is fighting though. Nikita Krylov is fighting Ed Herman. I wrote a piece about Krylov. Actually, I'm working on something for Fansided now about Krylov being a quiet contender. He's on a 4-fight win streak. He hasn't beaten any names in the division, but he's definitely put together some wins, some valuable wins that we may see him break through the top 10 if he can pull off a win against Ed Herman on Saturday. Don't want to spend too much time on this fight. Don't really have too much value, but what are your thoughts?
It's kind of like typical of a middleweight fight, to be quite honest. I have a good friend of the show, Connor Rebush. He's in love with the middleweights because of the averageness of the division. And this is just yet another example. 2 guys who haven't really beaten any names, who aren't really top-end athletes or top-end technicians, fighting in a fight that really isn't going to put either one of them in contention because they're not considered the best in the division. So it'll probably be a good fight because of how it's matched up. But it's kind of like, like you said, it's just a fight you watch because you're either invested in a fighter or you just like watching fights that much because it's not guaranteed to be a barn burner and it's not 2 big names either. So you're just kind of doing it because either you really love the middleweights or you just it's kind of like what you and me do. We have to watch the fights because we have to have the content ready for the fans who want to know our opinion on it.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely see that. There's a couple of other guys I'm interested in seeing this weekend. I'm interested in seeing the fight between Jorge Masvidal and Ross Pearson, just because I think both these guys, Masvidal definitely, he was on a run at lightweight. I don't know why he decided to make that jump to welterweight. I may have been weight issues, but he has 3 split decision losses that could have gone either way. So he has that, and then on the other hand, you have Pearson, who has losses, I think, since 2013. Who are very valuable to the division, to the sport, but who are just looking to get some momentum, looking to get direction. I'm looking for all to win this fight, but he has that penchant of taking his foot off the gas when fights are closer. And if he does that against Pearson, he'll lose another decision. And I just think I think he has the technical abilities to win this fight. But my question is going to be, is he going to keep it up for 15 minutes?
Yeah, that always seems to be the question. They're like versions of each other. Two guys who have really good boxing and really good in the stand-up, and who always seem to do just enough to lose. I mean, Ross Pearson put on a good show against Brooks, but he did just enough to lose. Masvidal had a fight against Larkin, and he did just enough to lose. It's like when facing against a certain caliber opponent, they clearly show their seasoning and experience in their class. But once they face the elite, they just never do enough to put enough points or enough rounds in the bank to win those fights. The difference is, in Pearson's case, he's not good enough to, and in Jorge Gamebred's in his case, he just cruises too much. Like, he can't tell the difference between I'm not losing a fight and winning a fight. Just because you're not losing it doesn't mean you're winning the fight. And he's like, this guy's not hurting me. I'm blocking his shots. I'm rolling with them. Look at me shaking his head. But he doesn't understand the fact that guy is putting 5 and 6 strike combinations together. Even though he's not getting hit, all the judges see is one guy throwing and one guy blocking and defending, throwing 1 or 2 shots in return. And he does that almost every fight he has. And when he turns it on, he looks great. He's countering. He's defensively slick. He's landing big shots. He's getting takedowns. And then all of a sudden he just goes on cruise control like, I have the fight won. And he just starts mugging and slipping and throwing pot shots and essentially giving away rounds. And he does it so much. It's just so frustrating because I'm a huge fan of his, and I really wish he was higher ranked and he had more opportunities. But it's a trend that continues with him each and every fight he's been in and every single organization he's fought in. I probably would go with him over Pearson because he actually has the ability to turn it on, and he usually beats this level of opponent. And he's actually a better all-around MMA fighter than Pearson. Pearson's still pretty one-dimensional, to be quite honest. So I'm gonna pick Gamebred, but you expect to see at some point, if he doesn't finish early, expect to see at some point where he's letting Pearson get off and letting Pearson dictate the pace because he just feels like Pearson can't hurt him, and he's done enough work, and now he's gonna showboat and play to the crowd and talk some trash to him instead of scoring points and putting rounds in the bank.
I can definitely see that happening. Wilson Hayes, title shot. Now, due to an injury to Demetrius Johnson, not only is that title shot gone, but he's fighting a lesser opponent. Do you think that was an interesting stance by the UFC? They basically flat out said, back up to get a title shot. You may question whether or not he earned the first one, but do you think that this was just the perfect opportunity for them to kind of take that fight away from him?
I don't know that the fight's taken away from him. It's like when we talked about John Moraga a couple of shows ago. The way Demetrius Johnson dominates the division, all you have to do is win a couple of fights because he's literally beating everybody between you and him. If you're a number 5 ranked fighter, he's going to beat the other 4, which means at some point they're going to be like, well, we need another contender. Let's let the number 5 guy. If you're the number 7 guy, he's going to beat the other 6 ahead of you, and then you're going to get your shot. Because he's so dominant, everybody gets their turn at him. And Wilson Hayes was about to get his turn. I honestly think they're giving him a lesser opponent, hoping that he'll put on a spectacular show that they can set up the fight for a later date because the Ultimate Fighter won't be done by then. And he'll still want to defend his title, depending on how bad the injury is. He'll probably want to fight again. So they're hoping he'll beat this guy, beat him in dominant fashion, and that'll kind of maybe stir some interest up that he's a threat to Demetrius Johnson. And they'll do the fight at a later date. They could have put him in with a better guy, but I think they want him to win, so they have a challenger on deck already.
And what's funny is that, they did have him plan to fight someone else, but that guy actually, Sean Santella, I think that was his name, he was forced out due to injury as well. So now we're but end of all, stepping in last minute notice for this fight here too. Let's talk about someone else who's rather interesting and new to the scene, Freddie Serrano. What do you know about this guy? I'm hearing some things about him. He only has 3 professional fights. I'm hearing people are pretty excited to see him fight. What do you know about Freddie?
Actually, I haven't heard. Somebody mentioned to me, but I haven't had a chance to do much research on him at all. They were telling me how he's kind of got a guy with some potential, and they think he could really do something. And I'm like, well, direct me to like where I can get more information on him. And I just never had a chance. I've just been so busy with, with the bigger name guys and trying to figure out what's going on in the matchups, especially in this past month where it's been fight after fight after fight, card after card after card. I haven't had a chance to kind of slow down and take a look at him. But, from what I've been told, he has talent, he has potential, but I couldn't honestly say that I know a lot about him as it stands right now.
Well, yeah, I just heard about it for the first time earlier this week. So I'm looking forward to seeing how well he does, see if he's someone that makes me want to turn around and go find out some more about him. That's really, what else about UFC 201 stands out to you? Is there anything else we didn't talk about? I'm not really focused on too much more. I'll just get July's action over with. But what else do you see about UFC 201 that stands out to you?
I mean, we've really hit on the key points. I mean, the Namajunas fight is huge because that's probably, like you said, will be the next title contender. Even if Woodley upsets Lawler, I mean, it'd be an upset. But, I mean, like, it turns the division on its head because now guys who had lost to Lawler can kind of get back in line to fight Woodley. But, I mean, Woodley's not exactly the most charismatic champion either. He's not drawing a bunch of eyes. And when he's dynamic and he's knocking people out, he's really exciting. Otherwise, he's not the most exciting guy to watch fight either, to be quite honest. So, I mean, like, and I expect good fights, but it's not the kind of thing where whatever happens on the show, regardless of who wins, is going to be the kind of thing I think everybody's going to be talking about, the next couple weeks and be like, oh my God, I'm so amazed. This is going to overshadow 202. I just don't think it's that kind of card. They don't have the kind of characters on the show to kind of put that stamp on it. They don't have those guys who bring that extra charisma, that extra attention, that extra energy. So, I mean, I'm excited to see good fights, but I don't have that sense of anticipation like when Rousey would fight or Conor McGregor would fight. It's just kind of another series of good fights.
So let's talk about some other fights that interest me outside of the UFC. We have a series of fighting going on. Two fights kind of stand out to me on this card. You have Marlon Moraes facing off against Josh Hill again. Are you interested in this fight at all? Why do you think they gave him such a so soon?
They're just running out of people. The World Series of Fighting, it's not a bad organization. With their top usually 3 or 4 fighters in their division, they've got guys who could compete in UFC or compete in Bellator. The problem is when you get further down, they don't have a lot of depth to their division. So it's like they're always when they bring in guys for their champions to fight, within a fight or two, the guy is challenging for the title because the champ's already beaten the other guys in the division. They don't have an exciting matchup to promote. So I think that's the reason Moraes is having this rematch. I really wish he would kind of leave the organization, not because I dislike them personally, but right now he's in a position where he's fighting guys where his athleticism and his aggression is enough to just walk through most people. I'm not saying he doesn't show skill or ability or even some IQ to a certain level, but the fact of the matter, he's so dynamic at this stage, and he's facing guys who are like a step and a half below him as regards to athleticism and technique, that he doesn't really have to do much else other than come out with his plan A. We don't know what he's like when he's under duress. We don't know that he can really fight back when it gets thick. We haven't seen that from him, and we're most likely not going to see that from him because there's not enough guys who can test him in all the areas or one particular area enough to really see what he's made out of. So I'm always interested in seeing him fight because he's got that kind of talent. He's got that kind of ability. but you never really know what you're going to get from the fight. You don't know if he's really going to get tested. You don't know if he's going to have to dig a little bit deeper and show something we haven't seen before. Right now, it's like a series of competitive showcase fights is basically what I compare the guys he's faced in World Series of Fighting. You know, guys who can push him a little bit, guys who can compete, but guys who clearly are on his level. And every time he fights, everybody's talking about how amazing he looked, how dynamic and how athletic he looked. We never know what he's made of because nobody's been able to force him to into those spots to test his character and test his IQ, test his cardio, and test the real depths of his skill. So, I mean, I'll watch because I like seeing guys with talent perform, but I'm not expecting it to be a dogfight. I'm not expecting to learn anything I didn't already know about this guy from this fight.
If Morales was to go to the UFC, how well do you think he would do?
I think the lower divisions are so tight. I think just off athleticism and his aggression and his skills, I think he could put together. I think he'd be outside of the top 10 initially. I just think there's so many guys who he's just not going to be able to blow past athletically. That's the biggest thing. He's had such a wide margin for error against lesser athletes, against guys who don't know how to compete against top-end athletes. And now once that you close that gap, that margin for error isn't as big. And when that margin for error isn't as big, all those mistakes that are little mistakes against B and B plus and B minus and C plus level fighters become fight-ending mistakes against the top-end guys. And that's where my concern is with him. I think he can be competitive. He might even work himself into the top 10, but I don't know that he'd ever be necessarily a champion because there's so many guys who match up, who can match that speed, or at least are gifted enough where they can counter that speed and can hit hard enough where they could really hurt him. And they have the experience against guys of his caliber athletically where that dazzling combo and big knee and big punch and big kick, that'll get their attention, but it's not going to strike fear into them and blow them off the table like it does these guys he's been fighting in the World Series of Fighting. That's the biggest thing against the UFC. It's not so much the guys are so much technically better or even athletically better. It's just that they have so many guys of comparable skill, talent, and athleticism that you learn how to make those factors a non-factor. You learn how to take away punching power. You learn how to take away explosiveness. You learn how to handle speed. And that only comes from facing explosive, power punching, fast guys who are as good an athlete as you are or better. He hasn't faced any guy who can challenge him in those areas, so he doesn't have any idea how he'd react. All those guys in the UFC, they've seen that before. They've seen dazzling speed and explosiveness. That's nothing new to them. And without having that advantage, I don't know how he does consistently. He'll come in and win 2 or 3 fights, but when they start putting him against the name guys or even some of the guys who are just the fringe guys, he's going to start having tougher fights. And he hasn't been in a fight in his entire career in the U.S. He's been in showcase fights where he's supposed to win, and he is the favorite guy, and he outclasses guys. He hasn't had to fight back, really. And I don't know what he's going to do when he has to fight back. I haven't seen it, so I can't bet on him doing it.
Yeah, I can definitely rock with that. I think he would be a top 10 guy. I think he definitely has the abilities to get some key wins at bantamweight, especially with the team that he trains with. So I could see him putting together a good streak to become a top 10 competitor, especially as you look at some of the guys that are kind of fading out of the division as well. Let's look at some other questions. Did you see the fight announcement of Vitor Belfort versus Gegard Mousasi? This fight interests me. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Are you interested in this fight here at middleweight?
I probably would have been really interested in it if Vitor was still on TRT. I'd probably be really interested because he's a whole different guy. I don't understand the UFC's matchmaking. I guess they're just using Belfort's name because he just hasn't been a really good fighter in years. Once he got off the TRT, he's good for about 2 or 3 big bursts of offense, and then he's got nothing. I mean, the last couple fights he's been taken down and pounded out, and he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he's shown no guard work, no ability to reverse, just nothing off his back. He gets taken down, and it's a wrap. And Mousasi isn't an exciting personality, and he's not dynamic in any one area, but he's one of the best all-round fighters in MMA. He can competently defend himself in every single position, in every single aspect of MMA, from grappling to boxing to kickboxing to wrestling. He's good enough in every single area that there's nowhere you can put him where he's not unfamiliar. And Belfort's no longer the athlete he used to be, which means he can't just blow Musasi's door off with a big burst of offense or dynamic knee or big punch or big flurry or whatever he likes to do. So, I mean, it's interesting to see what Belfort has left, but it's not really a good fight. Now, I don't understand the UFC's matchmaking. This isn't going to help Musasi make a name. I guess it'll help him make some money, but it's not going to move him up the ranks, and it's not going to show that he belongs as an elite person in the division. I guess he's just taking it just to take it, I suppose. I don't mean to insult him, but I mean, really, when has Belfort looked dominant in the past 2 or 3 years? He hasn't, except against Dan Henderson. Against Jacare, he got smashed. Against Weidman, he got smashed. And then he knocked out Dan Henderson, which isn't really all that impressive anymore. So, you know.
Yeah, I think the fight still does have some value for he can I think he can get some value from this jump up a spot or two in the rankings. So I don't totally agree with you there. Belfort hasn't looked great in his last few fights, but I still think that this is a fight with a win gives Belfort gives Mousasi some additional clout.
Yeah, I mean, given the fact that so many people are hurt and so many people are already involved, like Rocco was knocked out, so he can't fight. Bisping's not going to fight him. You got Weidman recovering from surgery, and Jacare, I think, had an injury. So there's not really many legitimate options for him out there. But, I mean, to me, I just don't see the challenge. And if he loses to Belfort, if he loses to him, he's tumbling way out of the rankings. As much as you think that fight might do for him, a loss just crushes him. That sets him back like 3 or 4 fights in division, minimum 3 or 4 fights if he loses to Belfort. Crushes any title hopes he has. He might as well just move to light heavyweight and try and get a title shot there because he essentially is out of the running in middleweight.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree with you on that there. Yes. What is the deepest division in MMA right now? I was writing a piece about women's bantamweight and how that division is very deep. It's kind of a clusterfuck right now with so many different but looking at the sport, what is the deepest division in mixed martial arts right now?
There's 2 divisions, I would say. And one thing about bantamweight is competitive because all the fighters are so terribly flawed. They all have some huge hole in their game, which is why somebody can exploit it. They're not fully developed for well-rounded fighters. That's why everything goes up and down consistently. They got like 2 rounded fighters in the entire division. I'm saying this with a completely straight face. I say this all the time. The deepest divisions right now to me in competitive divisions are probably still 155. 155 is the only division where you could win 4 or 5 fights in a row and still not be in the title contention. Go on 6 and 7 fight win streaks, and they're like, oh, in the 8th fight, he might become a true contender. You're like, 8 fight winning streak. If you go on a 4 fight winning streak in middleweight, you're getting a title fight. You go on a 2 fight winning streak in the heavyweight division, you're mentioned as a potential contender. Every other division, you win 4 or 5 fights in, you're instantly contender. In lightweight, you win 4 or 5 fights, you're contending to be a contender. That's how deep their division is. Literally, the 15th guy can beat the number 5 guy on any given night. There's no easy walkover opponents. There's no guys with any egregious holes or technical and athletic shortcomings for the most part. And there's tons of guys in every organization who the UFC can bring in who can instantly compete because the division is so stacked, so tightly, so closely stacked. And, I mean, Eddie Alvarez is a great example of that. Bellator champion, and he just wiped the floor with Rafael dos Anjos. And, you know, the guy who's the champion in Bellator stopped Eddie Alvarez and then went life and death with him in a rematch. So that shows you how small the gap is between different organizations and the lightweights in those organizations. The only other division I say is really tight like that is the strawweight division. The strawweight division has so many good fighters in it. It is so much better than the bantamweight division. Almost all the girls can grapple, strike. show good defense, show high cage IQ. It's in the couple years the strawweight division has been in, they've been better performances, better athletes, better fighters, and better fights than the bantamweight division. It's been even. Even the champion is dominant, but she's been in tough fights in almost all her fights before being champion and after being champion. So I'd say those two divisions are probably the best and deepest in my opinion.
Yeah, I can rock with that right now. I would definitely pick lightweight as well. I think featherweight, good group there too. They have a lot of good guys in the UFC. They have a couple of names outside the UFC too as well. In flyweight, and I'm not too sure. Our weight is coming along. So yeah, like we're at a time where we're seeing a lot of different deep divisions, a lot of compelling matchups across a lot of different groups. So except heavyweight, I can't stand heavyweight MMA. I don't care how many times I have to say it.
Hey, Raphael.
I will never.
Raphael.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Finish your thought. I actually had a question from a listener, and I wanted to get your opinion on it.
Okay, well, I was done. I was just about to go on a I hate heavyweight MMA rant. But yeah, go ahead and ask me.
Okay, I actually have a friend of the show, Victor O. He's actually an aspiring MMA fighter, soon to be taken off to start his training. He actually had a question. He was trying to get our opinion on fighter training and kind of like the development top teams get out of the fighters they bring in, like as far as like really improving them and taking them to the next level. If those top teams really make a difference, or is it a matter of that person's prior accomplishments and natural ability being the determining factor in their success moving forward?
So are you asking if it's training versus natural ability?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, there's a lot of camps that have fighters, and if you've noticed, certain camps only get success from guys who were top-end athletes. The rest of their guys are 500 fighters at best, but their best athletes, their blue-chip guys, all seem to do well. So it's like, is it because you're such a good coach, or is it because you have blue-chip athletes? Because the rest of your fighters are 500 at best. Why is there such a drop-off from the very best to the average guys? I mean, I understand the elite is the elite, but there shouldn't be that kind of difference as far as their performance based off who they're fighting.
Yeah, no, I think coaching plays a big part because coaches have ability not only help you improve your weaknesses, but help you improve your strengths. And everyone can be a natural athlete, but being a natural athlete will only get you so far. So you need someone that can help you take that talent and take it to the next level. Example, I'll use Edson Barboza for an example. When he joined Mark Henry's group in New Jersey, he was already a vicious, had some very crisp striking as well. But in the last few years, especially his last maybe 5 fights, in general, his striking has gone to a whole nother level. Marlon Moraes too as well. He had some very strong mechanics when he came into the fight game. But working with Ricardo Almeida and Mark Henry, his game has gone to a whole nother level. Look at Frankie Edgar. Many people consider him just a wrestler, just a boring wrestler when he came into the sport. Look at his fight against Matt Beach and compare that to his fight against some of his recent fights now. The training that you get goes a long way in determining how great of a fighter you will be. I mean, this is the same thing across all sports. Look at LeBron James. Physical athlete when he first came into the game. Look at how much his game has changed now to being a superstar of an athlete. So much more. If you put LeBron James now and put him against the LeBron James that came into the league, he would destroy that version. His ability to learn the game, study the game, train the game has gotten so much better. I think this is customary across sports that training always beats natural athleticism.
Okay, I would tend to agree with you there. Like I said, I've noticed some teams that, and I understand, like I said before, the elite guys are going to get better results. But the way I usually gauge a coach by how good they are isn't by what you do with the elite guys, because the elite guys give you so much room for error. They can do so much because they have so much natural ability. It's like, what do you get out of those guys who are maybe B-level talents or C-level talents? When you have those guys, you get them to compete and hold their own or win fights in the UFC. That's when I'm impressed, because they don't have that natural explosiveness, that power, that dynamic fluidity to lean on. They actually have to work for every position and work to get out of every position. And that's where you show the craft, the real understanding of what you're doing, the real understanding of what your opponent's doing. And that's what I consider to be excellent coaching and excellent development, when you have guys who really understand the finer points of the game. Because a lot of guys aren't students of the game. And when you can turn a fighter from just a fighter into a guy who knows how to decipher and react correctly to a myriad of situations and attacks, that's when I know that you've really been coaching him. That's when I really know that you've shown him something. Anybody can show him the punch, the kick, the knee, the takedown. It's when to use them and how to use them in the right spots and how to minimize the impact of certain techniques and certain approaches. Not necessarily shut them down, but how to minimize them so you can maximize the opportunities that you have when you have a chance to enact them. When you get in that dangerous spot, or when you have an opportunity to reverse, or you have an opportunity to establish that jab or to spin off the cage. It's those little bits of awareness and intelligence and discipline determine what a great fighter and what a great team has to offer. And I don't see that every big camp has that. It's like they just teach some guys some skills and throw them out there. That's why I think a lot of guys depend more on talent than they actually depend on legitimate coaching and understanding, because I don't see a lot of cage IQ and awareness when they fight.
I can get with you on that there. So let's go ahead and talk about closing the show out here on UFC 201.
Actually, my final thoughts are going to be brief, because I had one other thing I wanted to mention really quick. I think it'll be a good card. I think it'll be more exciting fights. It won't have the star power, so like you said, it probably won't do a great number, but it'll be a good night of fights. And you and I are combat sports enthusiasts, so we're going to watch, and I think we're going to get our fill of bloodshed and technique and the hard determination you see with the fighters in the UFC. But I don't think it'll be that kind of standout event where guys are it's going to shut down ESPN and Twitter. I just don't see that. Even if there's upsets, it's just not going to it doesn't carry that kind of weight. One thing I wanted to mention, we did talk about that fight that happened just recently with Holm and I can't say her name, Valentina. And I was actually not surprised at all at the result. I like Holly Holm as a person, and I like what she stands for, and I like how far she's taken her abilities and what she's accomplished. But you got to see an example of what happens when you put an athlete who can strike against an actual world-class striker. And she was exposed a little bit on the feet. Everybody thought her hole was the fact that she can't grapple and she can't really wrestle. And the fact is, she's kind of a one-dimensional striker, and that got exposed. And she's actually the second best striker in the division. But there's a big gap between number 2 and number 1, and we got to see the 2 best strikers in the division fight. And you got to see the difference between a world-class striker and a world-class athlete who's pretty good at striking. And I think that's something that gets underrated a lot in MMA, because a lot of people don't understand stand-up arts. They don't understand the nuance and the subtleties. And so they think that Holly Holm's on the level of a girl like Valentina, or technically as good as Joanna. And she's not. She's good. She's competent. She's well coached, but she's fairly limited, and she's attribute-based in everything she does. And that got exposed last weekend, and I think it's an important fight that people get to see and understand the context of what a real striking technician can do and what somebody who's touted as such can do. And that was a highlight. We understand the difference between a top grappler and an average one. Now we got to see the difference between a supposedly top striker and a real top striker. And it wasn't even close, and it wasn't even competitive.
I'm not going to say she's supposedly a top striker. She's definitely a top striker. She wouldn't have done what she's done the sport or in combat sports without being such. Because remember, I mean, hell, Valentina Shevchenko has 3 wins over Joanna Jacek, and we're not ever going to say she's not a top striker. there are different classes of athlete. I mean, I'll speak to collegiate wrestling, for example. You know, Brock Lesnar was a national champion heavyweight wrestler, fantastic athlete. Daniel Cormier, another guy, fantastic collegiate wrestler. Neither one of them can touch. That doesn't mean that they're supposedly great wrestlers. No, that just means that Chael Sanderson was that much better than them in the game. So I'm not going to denigrate their skills in that area because they ran into someone who's better than them. There's actually a piece I saw earlier today about Holly Holm and questioning if this is really who she is. I think she's still a fantastic striker. I think that there's things she could have done differently. When she fought Shevchenko, and she even admitted that herself, there are things she could have done a lot differently or could have done more of. Completely denigrate what she's done in the sport and denigrate her abilities, but I will acknowledge the fact that she ran into a person who was a better striker than she at UFC on Fox on 20. I mean, there are so many different examples of Luke Rocco was a better striker than Michael Bisping. He proved that in the first fight. I mean, he was piecing Bisping up at first, but then he got clipped the second time around. About so many different athletes who have reached that point and have lost. Quick to question her as a striker when there are many examples of people just being defeated by someone who happens to be better than them at a specific skill set.
Yeah, I respect that. I respect that completely. And you know what? I like the fact that we can disagree respectfully with each other. But I will say this. As soon as this fight was announced months ago, I was on Twitter, and I must have wrote like an 18-page dissertation on how this fight was going to go and what was going to happen to Holly Holm. And literally I had my mentions flooded with people being like, you called this 3 months ago, and it happened exactly the way you said it. And how did you figure it out? And I know I come across harsh sometimes, but I mean, I see things a little bit differently to people, and that's what people like when they listen to the show and they follow me on Twitter. They want that different opinion that's not going to be with the narrative of world-class striker. They want a different kind of perspective, and I had a very different perspective. I had a much different perspective than everybody else in this fight, and this time I was right. Sometimes I'm wrong, and I admit that, but this time I was right, and it went exactly how I wanted from beginning to end, and I was tweeting throughout the whole fight. And like I said, I don't mean to disrespect her. I think she's good at what she does. But when you're a truly great striker, certain things happen, and I didn't see them happen. And maybe it's not a matter of her. Maybe it's her coaching. I'm not quite sure. But, you know, she's still the second best in division. Nobody else is going to stand up with her like that. But, you know, I just wanted to get that out there because it was kind of it was a fight I felt very strongly about. And a lot of people felt very strongly in the opposite direction from me. And I just wanted to make sure I addressed that issue. Some people had asked me if I was going to address it on the show, and I wanted to make sure that I made a point to address that on the show.
Cool, man. I can definitely appreciate that conversation for sure. But we're going to bring this show to a close. You know, we're back every week, every Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday to talk MMA. So we'll be back next week to recap 201 World Series of Fighting and some whatever news comes out of the sport of combat sports. You know, so stay doing your thing, Schwann. I appreciate having you on, and we will talk with you next week.
Well, I appreciate you letting me be on, of course. It's always a pleasure. Anybody who's listening, tell your friends. I mean, we're doing some really good stuff over here, and we're always going to give you a different opinion than what you're going to get from the masses of other people covering MMA and the MMA fighters. We're not afraid to kind of speak our opinions and say some unpopular things and say some inflammatory things because it's what we think and what we feel, and you're always going to get that from us. And I hope you continue to listen and continue to support.
For sure, man. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you, sir.